Welcome to Glory Days. I'm Nick Brooks and today we're going to be talking cricket. The IPL's in full swing, and if you're anything like me, it'll be occupying your mind, eating into your working hours and forcing you to cancel plans. It's the greatest show in cricket. Even if you're a traditionalist who can't stand to watch a match, you'll surely appreciate the fact that it's totally changed the game. But was it always destined to be like this? Was T20 cricket bound to take over from the start? Let's take a look. When the English Cricket Board launched the T20 Blast 21 years ago, there was more than a little scepticism. Really, T20 cricket was born as a gimmick, the result of an ambitious customer survey designed to bring fans back to flagging county grounds. Across the board, the reception was lukewarm. County chairmen took plenty of convincing to get the proposal off the ground. In every corner of the globe, administrators scoffed at this microwave-ready meal of a format. That first tournament was a success, but few saw T20 cricket as anything more than a bit of fun. It was a great way to sell tickets, to bring in Friday night crowds who'd gorged themselves on burgers and beer, but the feeling was that this crash, bang and wallop could never compete with the ebb and flow of a test match. In those early days, the bells and whistles of the new format caught the eye more than anything that went on inside the boundary. The old-fashioned pavilion was replaced with pitch-side dugouts. Fielders were mic'd up so they could share thoughts with commentators as the game unfolded. On finals day, there was a mascot race where grown men in furry outfits battled past obstacles to reach the finish line. Cricket's a conservative space. If this was your idea of fun, you were meant to feel guilty about it. Fans were constantly reminded that this was a Mickey Mouse version of the sport, that the likes of Hobbs, Grace and Bradman would be turning in their graves. The same spirit of frivolity invaded the first men's T20 international. New Zealand and Australia wore retro kits, Hamish Marshall rocked an outrageous perm, and Glenn McGrath paid homage to Trevor Chappell by pretending to send a ball down underarm. The message was loud and clear: T20 cricket was not to be taken seriously. The loudest jibes came from South Asia, which had inarguably emerged as the new spiritual home of cricket during the course of the 90s. India had been slow to warm to ODIs and seemed especially unamused by this latest development. The national side reluctantly played its first T20 in December 2006. When India's first domestic T20 tournament launched 4 months later, it wasn't even shown on TV. Still, not everyone was blind to the charms of T20 cricket. Malcolm Speed, the CEO of the ICC, recognised the importance of launching a global tournament before someone else beat him to the punch. He and ICC chairman Ishan Mani understood that this new format could take the game into uncharted territory. The first T20 World Cup was planned for September 2007. But getting national boards to sign up would prove a trickier task. Neither India nor Pakistan were keen to play. Only a clever piece of quid pro quo convinced them to take part. The South Asian nations had submitted a non-compliant bid to host the 2011 World Cup. It was rejected, but Mani pledged to consider a revised proposal if the teams boarded the plane to South Africa. The Asian sides agreed. The first World T20 was all set. Still, the jury was out as to whether the tournament would prove a success. There was an air of slapdash about the whole thing. Sponsors were announced just 2 weeks before it kicked off. In lieu of proper qualifiers, Kenya and Scotland made the cut by virtue of performances in a 50-over league. Most worryingly, India's biggest stars, Tendulkar, Dravid, Ganguly, Laxman and Kumble, all opted out. But the tournament had things working in its favour too. The 50-over World Cup, which had taken place earlier in the year, had been a turgid affair. A bloated disaster blighted by overpriced tickets, early exits for India and Pakistan, and a farcical final. This 2-week smash and grab seemed an ideal antidote, and organisers priced tickets down to make sure capitalism wouldn't cannibalise the spectacle. Full stadiums were a good start, and though many couldn't see it at the time, this new format hit the mid-noughties zeitgeist. Twitter had launched in July 2006. The iPhone arrived 11 months later. If T20 was anything, it was time is money cricket, a modern spin to suit short attention spans, a game for the smartphone, social media generation. Still, for the tournament to prove a success, there'd have to be another non-negotiable: absorbing competitive cricket. The gods were smiling down on South Africa in 2007. The tournament's first game pitted West Indies against the hosts. Chris Gayle slammed T20 cricket's first international century before South Africa chased down a mammoth target with 14 balls to spare. This felt different to what had gone before. Cheerleaders danced in the stands, a DJ blasted out beats, and with sixes raining down, half the crowd wore tournament-sponsored hard hats. The fun was just getting started. 3 days later, Sri Lanka flexed their muscles, putting up 260 against Kenya. Later that day, India beat Pakistan in a bowl-out, cricket's short-lived answer to penalties. In the Super 8s, Yuvraj made history by launching Stuart Broad for 6 sixes in an over, the third time the feat had been achieved in international cricket. I can still remember exactly where I was when that happened. If you saw it, you probably can too. Almost 2 decades later, Indian fans still take to Twitter to gloat about the incidents. It's one of those rare events that become inscribed in the sport's folklore. After all, this was Indian T20 cricket's first truly iconic moment, the opening line of a song that would change the game forever. But tournaments live and die on their finals, and India and Pakistan is a broadcaster's dream. It's like El Clasico, Brazil-Argentina and England-Germany rolled into one, an emotional rivalry between cricket-crazy neighbours. It often draws more than 1 billion viewers. Even when the match itself falls short as a contest, it remains must-watch TV. And this final was one for the ages. A late blast from young Rohit Sharma batting down the order helped India stagger to 157. At 77 for 6 and 104 for 7, Pakistan looked dead and buried. But Misbah-ul-Haq kept them in the hunt. For Misbah, it was so nearly a storybook ending. Prior to 2007, he'd spent years in the wilderness, even playing club cricket in England. He was a surprise pick for the tournament, yet he carried Pakistan into the last over, 9 wickets down, needing 13 to win. A wide made it 12 off 6. With a second ball maximum, Pakistan went favourites. Needing 6 off 4, they were in the driver's seat, but with fine leg up in the circle, Misbah premeditated a paddle scoop. The ball, on a hard length well outside off, would have been better off being hit to any other part of the ground. It looped straight up into the air and into Sreekanth's hands. India were inaugural T20 World Champions. It was their first major piece of silverware since 1983, a totally unexpected triumph with profound knock-on effects. Dhoni had been a cult figure since he burst onto the international scene in 2004, but it was here that he emphatically emerged as a bona fide global star. He was built different, a gust of fresh air breathing new life into Indian cricket. There was something of the everyman about MSD. After all, he'd started out as a train ticket inspector and batted and kept with a style that was proudly homemade. Yet he carried a mythical quality too, the flowing locks, the film star looks. You could almost imagine him as an ancient warrior atop a horse, leading his men into battle. That's not something you'd say about Sachin, or Dravid, or Ganguly. But above all, Dhoni clearly thought differently about cricket. He had that Midas touch, that innate tactical understanding, that rare ability to raise the game of those who took the field alongside him. During the bowl-out, he shocked everyone by picking 2 batters to shy at the stumps, sensing they had a better radar than his frontline bowlers. And whereas Pakistan's keeper Kamran Akmal stood in a standard position, Dhoni set himself directly behind the stumps, asking bowlers to aim at his chest. Equally, when Australia were threatening to blow India away in the semi-final, we got the first glimpse of a sight that would soon become standard. Dhoni strolling down the wicket to calmly chat to his bowler. A few words of advice, a new plan, and a big wicket. And when the final came down to the wire, Dhoni could have turned to his veteran Harbhajan, but instead gave the last over to the unknown, unheralded Joginder Sharma. Outside of this match, Sharma bagged a sum total of 3 wickets for India, yet he's forever a part of Indian cricketing history. So too is Dhoni. He and his men returned home as heroes, riding an open-top bus from the airport all the way to the Wankhede. Never again would Dhoni be able to step onto the street without a frantic crowd in his wake. Even today, his presence on the field ensures stadiums packed full of delirious fans. Yet T20 cricket emerged as an unlikely star too. Fans across India, who'd dismissed it as a baseball-style bastardisation of the game, suddenly saw that it could be tactical, technical, and full of drama. If Test cricket was a sprawling Victorian novel, T20 was a 21st century action film, full of explosions taut with tension, an undeniable source of instant gratification. With cricket condensed down into the space of 3 hours, every ball became an event in its own right. Yet had India not surged to the final, would anyone back home have given it the time of day? One of the enduring images of the final was of Bollywood megastar Shah Rukh Khan watching on in the stands, proudly waving the Indian flag aloft in the night sky. His presence set media and fans into a frenzy. It put out a powerful message that T20 cricket was now cool. Writing for The Guardian in the wake of the final, David Hobbs reckoned India, so suspicious of 2020, will now surrender to it. That was music to the ears of one man in particular. Business mogul Lalit Modi had been trying to get a city-based, franchise cricket league going for years, but had had a tough time getting anyone to take his idea seriously. Unperturbed, Modi opted for an if you can't beat them, join them approach, and by 2005 had risen to become vice president of the BCCI. Inspired by the unstoppable growth of Premier League football, but also by the money-spinning American sports leagues, Modi saw the commercial potential of a cricketing carbon copy. The equal finance lock league was particularly attractive to investors, since there was no threat of relegation and scuppering revenues, and annual auctions meant the worst team one year could be the best side the next. But cricket had always been about international battles. Could Modi get the buy-in for this radical new idea? The BCCI announced the tournament on the 13th of September 2007, with the backing of Tendulkar, Dravid and Ganguly. But the jury was still out over the league's prospects of success. 2 weeks later, with India newly crowned as world champions, the road ahead had cleared. When the 8 franchises were auctioned off to owners the following January, Bollywood stars and titans of business scrambled to get a piece of the action. All 8 teams fetched well in excess of their 50 million base price. Among the owners there was Shah Rukh Khan, Preeti Zinta and the Ambani family, who shelled out $111.9 million for the Mumbai Indians. That was just the start. Sony bought a decade's worth of broadcast rights for a shade over $1 billion. The biggest names in world cricket signed up for the player auction in February. None of them drew as much interest as Dhoni, who eventually signed to play for Chennai Super Kings. 6 weeks' work in exchange for $1.5 million. Those sort of numbers, commonplace in cricket now, were unheard of then, and in hindsight, signing him looks shrewd business. After all, Dhoni's led CSK to 5 IPL titles and remains unchallenged as the league's biggest star. That only seems right. Were it not for his heroics in South Africa over a fortnight in 2007, the IPL might never have gotten off the ground. Of course, the cricket had to be good for it to truly take flight. From the moment Brendan McCullum smashed 158 in the IPL's opening match, that was rarely in doubt. The league brought Bollywood inside the boundary. There was an element of fantasy about it. What cricket fan could not be excited by the prospect of Sachin and Sanath or Gilchrist and Gibbs opening the batting together? And it had a fairy tale story too. The Rajasthan Royals, captained and coached by the ageing Shane Warne, started the tournament as the least fancied of all the teams. Yet they ended it as champions, their unlikely combination of cricketing geriatrics and unheralded kids producing surprisingly potent performances. 16 years later, the sports landscape has been totally transformed. Every year from March to May, the cricketing world stops, turning its focus squarely towards the Indian Premier League. ODI cricket has fallen away to the point that players openly question its relevance. More copycats have sprung up than fans can keep track of. The PSL, the CPL, the BPL, the Big Bash, the 100, the LPL, the SA20. And that's just the start. Yet none of them have come close to matching the glitz, the glamour, and the draw of the Indian original. Yet had Dhoni's team limped out of the first World T20 in the group stages? Would the IPL and franchise cricket have taken off in such explosive style? Would India still regard T20 as an irrelevant sideshow? Would we still be watching 50-over cricket? It's impossible to say, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop me a line and let me know what you think.